Do not look into his eyes unless you are ready to lose yourself. That was the warning whispered through Blackwood Palace as the silver bells called every unmated woman to the mating ceremony. Yet by dusk, they came anyway, dressed in silk, moonstone and hope, filling the grand hall until the air shimmered with perfume, ambition and nervous breath. Evelyn Carter heard the warning too, but she did not have the luxury of fear. She was carrying a tray of crystal glasses across the polished marble floor, careful not to slip, careful not to meet anyone's gaze, careful to remain what she had always been inside the palace walls, useful, quiet and unseen. Above her, chandeliers glowed like captured stars. Along the walls, banners of the Blackwood bloodline hung in deep black and silver, their embroidered wolves watching from the fabric as if they already knew which hearts would break before midnight. Every noble daughter in the kingdom had arrived believing destiny might choose her. Evelyn had arrived with a stain remover tucked into her apron pocket, and a blister forming beneath the heel of her left shoe. "Move faster, Maid," Lady Brooke Hale snapped as Evelyn passed behind her chair. Brooke was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful, all pale gold hair, white satin, and a smile sharpened by years of being obeyed. "The king will be here any minute, and I won't have my night ruined by a clumsy omega." Evelyn lowered her eyes. "Yes, my lady." The words came softly, practiced from years of survival. She did not say that she had been awake since before sunrise polishing the very floor Brooke stood on. She did not say that the flowers in Brooke's hair had been pinned there by Evelyn's own tired hands. She only adjusted the tray against her hip and stepped back into the shadow near the banquet table, where servants belonged. Around her the women began to whisper. Some pressed gloved hands to their chests. Some touched the jewels at their throats. Some stood on their toes to see the great doors at the far end of the hall. They were waiting for Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood, the ruler no woman could resist and no woman had ever truly reached. The stories about him were told differently in every pack. That his voice could silence a room, that his wolf was older than the northern forests, that one glance from his silver eyes could make even proud daughters of alphas forget their own names. Evelyn had seen him from a distance many times, crossing corridors at midnight, standing alone on balconies in the snow, sitting at council with a face so still it looked carved from winter. She had never seen him smile. She had never wished for him to look at her. People like Evelyn survived by knowing the distance between a candle and a star. Then the bells stopped. The great doors opened. The entire hall seemed to inhale. Nathaniel Blackwood entered without hurry, dressed in black formal attire trimmed with silver, his dark hair brushed back from a face too controlled to be called cruel and too lonely to be called cold. His presence moved ahead of him like a storm rolling over open land. One by one, the women in the hall fell silent. Then as his gaze swept across them, they began to sink to their knees. Not from command, not from law, from something deeper, stranger, woven into the blood and breath of every wolf in the room. A noblewoman gasped as if hearing music no one else could hear. Another began to cry. Brooke Hale trembled with a smile of triumph, convinced that her reaction meant destiny had found her first. Within seconds, nearly every woman in the grand hall had bowed beneath the pull of the Alpha King's power. Every woman, except the maid standing beside the banquet table with a damp cloth in one hand and a fallen glass at her feet. Evelyn noticed the glass before she noticed the silence. It had rolled beneath the edge of the table, catching the chandelier light in small broken flashes. She crouched, picked it up, checked the rim for cracks and set it carefully back on the tray. Only then did she realize no one else was standing. Her breath caught. Hundreds of eyes turned toward her. Brooke's face tightened with disbelief. The royal guard shifted. The musicians froze with their bows hovering above strings. And at the center of the hall, Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood stopped walking. For the first time that night his expression changed. Not anger. Not offense. Recognition, sharp and impossible, flickered through his silver eyes as he looked past silk, jewels, rank and beauty, straight at the pale maid in gray who had not fallen for him at all. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the cloth. She lowered her head at once, heat rising to her cheeks. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," she whispered, though she did not know what she had done wrong. The hall waited for him to punish her, dismiss her, expose her as an insult to the ancient ceremony. Instead, Nathaniel took one slow step toward her, and every kneeling woman seemed to vanish from his world. Nathaniel's first step sounded impossibly loud against the marble. A single measured note that seemed to travel through every candle flame and every held breath in the grand hall. Evelyn kept her head bowed, but she could feel him coming closer. The way a person feels thunder before the rain reaches the windows. She wanted to kneel like the others, not because his power demanded it, but because standing had suddenly become dangerous. Standing made her visible. Standing made her different. And in Blackwood Palace, different was rarely forgiven. "Your Majesty," Brooke Hale said quickly, her voice sweet but strained. "The maid is only confused. She has been working all day." I am certain she meant no disrespect. The words were polished like glass, but Evelyn heard the warning hidden underneath them. "Do not embarrass me. Do not ruin this. Do not think this moment belongs to you." Nathaniel did not look at Brooke. His gaze stayed on Evelyn, steady and unreadable. "What is your name?" he asked. Evelyn's throat tightened. No king had ever asked her that. Most nobles did not ask servants for names unless something had gone wrong. "Evelyn Carter, Your Majesty." A murmur moved through the hall. Carter. A plain name. A servant name. A name that carried no territory, no title, no bloodline worth announcing beneath chandeliers. Brooke gave a small laugh, trying to make it sound gentle. "She is an Omega from the lower household staff. I doubt she even understands the ceremony." Evelyn's fingers curled around the damp cloth in her hand. She did understand. Perhaps better than Brooke thought. She understood that every woman kneeling on the floor was hoping to be lifted into glory. She understood that every family in the room had placed a dream, a bargain, or a debt on the shoulders of their daughters. She understood that power could wear a crown and still feel like a cage. "Did you feel anything when I entered?" Nathaniel asked. The question crossed the room like a match struck in the dark. Evelyn hesitated. Lying would be safer. A servant survived by giving people the answers they expected, not the truth they deserved. But something in his face stopped her. Beneath the stillness, beneath the royal distance, there was a tiredness so old it made her chest ache. "Yes, Your Majesty," she said softly. Brooke's smile returned, sharp with relief. Several women lifted their heads as if the world had corrected itself. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "What did you feel?" Evelyn swallowed. "I felt sorry that everyone was staring at you as if you were a prize instead of a person." Silence fell so completely that even the candles seemed to pause. Evelyn realized too late what she had said. Heat rushed up her neck. She lowered her gaze further, wishing the floor would open beneath her shoes. "Forgive me. I spoke out of turn." But Nathaniel did not rebuke her. He looked at her as if she had reached through the noise of the hall and touched a locked door no one else had ever found. Around them the women remained kneeling, some dazed, some weeping softly, their attention still tangled in the strange pull of his presence. Evelyn alone stood outside it, not immune to fear, not immune to kindness, only immune to whatever had bent everyone else toward him. Brooke rose halfway from her kneel, unable to hide the edge in her voice. "Your Majesty, surely the ceremony should continue. The moon is at its highest point, and the candidates are waiting." Nathaniel finally turned his eyes toward her, and Brooke's confidence trembled. "The ceremony will continue when I say it continues." He spoke quietly, yet the words carried to every corner of the hall. Then he looked back at Evelyn. "Come here." Evelyn's heart stumbled. She stepped forward because a king had commanded it, but each footstep felt like crossing a frozen lake. The tray in her hand shook. A crystal glass chimed softly against another, a tiny sound that made nearby nobles smirk. Nathaniel noticed. He reached out, not for her face, not for her shoulder, but for the heavy tray that no one else had thought to take from her. "You have carried enough tonight," he said. Evelyn looked up before she could stop herself. His silver eyes were not warm. They were not gentle in any simple way. They were guarded, stormlit, and terribly lonely. Yet when his gloved hands closed around the tray, the force that had overwhelmed the room did not touch her. No dizziness. No pull. No dreamlike surrender. Only the clean shock of being seen. For one heartbeat, Evelyn forgot to be invisible. Then Brooke's voice sliced through the stillness. "Careful, Your Majesty. Some servants learn very young how to pretend innocence when they want attention." The hall stirred, grateful for a reason to doubt what it had just witnessed. Evelyn stepped back at once, shame tightening around her ribs. Nathaniel placed the tray on the banquet table with deliberate care. Then he removed one black glove, folded it once, and set it beside the glasses. The gesture was small, but the room seemed to understand it was dangerous. His bare hand hovered between himself and Evelyn, a test no one had named aloud. "No one has stood before me untouched in 7 years," he said, low enough that only those nearest could hear. "So tell me, Miss Carter, are you pretending? Or are you the first honest thing this palace has seen in a very long time?" The question hung between them like a candle held too close to silk. Evelyn stared at Nathaniel's bare hand, not because she wanted to take it, but because every instinct she had learned in the lower halls warned her that touching a king could change a servant's life in ways she might not survive. Around her, the grand hall waited with hungry silence. The noblewomen remained lowered beneath the strange weight of his presence, their jeweled fingers trembling against the marble. Brooke Hale watched with a smile that had lost all softness. Evelyn knew that smile. She had seen it in pantry doorways and laundry rooms, on faces that enjoyed seeing someone small reminded of how small she was. "I am not pretending, Your Majesty," Evelyn said at last, her voice quiet enough that it nearly disappeared beneath the crackle of the hearths. "I would not know how to pretend something so important." A ripple of amusement moved through the court, thin and cruel, but Nathaniel did not laugh. His hand stayed extended. "Then take my hand." Evelyn's breath caught. That would not be proper. Neither is an entire room falling to its knees because of a curse dressed as destiny. The word curse struck the hall harder than any command. Several council members stiffened along the side walls. Brooke's father, Alpha Richard Hale, rose from his seat among the visiting leaders, his silver beard trimmed neatly, his expression calm in the way powerful men looked calm when they were measuring how much truth needed to be buried. "Your Majesty," he said, "perhaps this is not a subject for public discussion." Nathaniel did not turn. It became public the moment every daughter in this room was brought here to be tested against it. Evelyn felt the floor tilt beneath the meaning of his words. Curse. Tested. 7 years. She looked again at the women around her, at their bright gowns and glassy eyes, and what she had thought was devotion suddenly looked more like sleepwalking. A cold sadness moved through her. These women had not come only for ambition. Some had come because their families told them it was honor. Some had come because songs made kings sound like answers. Some had come because the world taught girls to mistake being chosen for being loved. "I do not understand," Evelyn whispered. For the first time, Nathaniel's voice softened. "Neither did I, not at first." Then he lowered his hand slightly, not withdrawing it, only making it less like a royal order and more like an invitation. "When I was crowned, the old magic in my blood woke with me. It makes women see what they most desire when they look too long. A crown. Safety. Beauty. Revenge. A place above those who once looked down on them. They do not see me." His silver eyes held hers, and there was no spell in them for Evelyn, only exhaustion worn with discipline. "You did." Evelyn should have stepped back. A wiser girl would have. A noble girl could have turned the moment into triumph. Evelyn only thought of all the nights she had passed the eastern balcony carrying fresh towels to the guest wing and seen the king standing alone in the snow without a coat, as if cold was the only honest thing allowed to touch him. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The hall inhaled. Nothing happened. No silver fire burst from the chandeliers. No song rose from the stones. Evelyn did not swoon, tremble, or smile as if heaven had opened above her. Nathaniel's fingers closed gently around hers, warm and steady, and the silence that followed was more powerful than any magic. His expression changed again, almost too small to notice, but Evelyn saw it because servants survived by noticing the things others missed. Relief passed through him like the first break in a long winter. Then Brooke laughed. It was a bright, brittle sound. "How touching. The maid can hold a hand. Shall we crown her now, or wait until she spills wine on the throne?" A few nobles laughed with her, eager to make the impossible ordinary again. Evelyn tried to pull her hand away, but Nathaniel did not let go. He did not grip harder. He simply held on as if her retreat mattered. "Lady Hale," he said, still watching Evelyn. "You will speak to her by name." Brooke's smile faltered. "Your Majesty? Her name is Evelyn Carter." The correction should have been small. It was not. It moved through the room like a door opening in a wall no one had questioned. Evelyn felt tears sting the backs of her eyes and hated herself for it. She had been hungry before. Tired. Afraid. She had endured all of that with a straight spine. But hearing her name spoken with dignity in a room that had never owed her any nearly undid her. Alpha Richard Hale stepped forward, his voice smooth. No one wishes to disrespect Miss Carter, of course. We are only concerned. An unknown servant showing resistance to royal magic on the very night of selection is unusual. It may indicate interference. The word interference darkened the room. Evelyn knew what it meant before anyone explained it. Suspicion could ruin a servant faster than guilt. Brooke's eyes gleamed. My father is right. For all we know, she carried something into the hall. A charm. A hidden token. Some kitchen-born trick. Evelyn's face went pale. I carried glasses. Brooke tilted her head. And perhaps something else. Before Evelyn could answer, the head housekeeper, Mrs. Albright, appeared near the servants' entrance, her lined face tight with worry. Evelyn's stomach dropped. If the household was blamed, everyone below stairs could suffer for this. The kitchen boys. The laundry girls. The older servants who had nowhere else to go. She pulled her hand free from Nathaniel's, this time before he could stop her. Please, Your Majesty, she said, turning toward him with sudden urgency. Do not let them punish the staff. No one knew I would be here except Mrs. Albright, and only because I was assigned to service the west tables. If something is wrong with me, then let it be only me. Nathaniel looked at her for a long second. The hall expected fear. He saw something else. Not defiance shaped like pride, not innocence shaped for display, but a girl who had just been accused before a kingdom and still thought first of protecting people who could not protect themselves. His voice lowered until it was almost gentle. That is exactly why I do not believe anything is wrong with you. Nathaniel's answer did not quiet the room. It sharpened it. Evelyn could feel suspicion gathering around her like frost on glass. Each stare colder than the last. Each whisper carrying the same question in a different voice. Who was she to stand where noble daughters had fallen? Who was she to be seen by a king who had ignored queens in waiting? She wished she could step backward into the servants' corridor, past the silver doors, down the narrow stairs that smelled of soap and warm bread, back to a world where the worst thing that could happen was a broken plate or a burned hand from the kitchen stove. But Nathaniel stood between her and the court now, and somehow that made everything more dangerous. Alpha Richard Hale gave a careful bow, the kind that honored the crown while challenging the man beneath it. Your Majesty, no one questions your judgment. We question the circumstances. Royal magic has rules. If this young woman is unaffected, the kingdom deserves to know why. Brooke lifted her chin, encouraged by her father's calm. A simple inspection would settle it. If she carries no charm, she has nothing to fear. Evelyn's stomach tightened. Servants were inspected when silver went missing, when a jewel clasp disappeared, when a lady claimed a ribbon had been stolen and later found it in her own drawer. Evelyn had stood through enough of those humiliations to know the truth. An inspection was never about finding guilt. It was about reminding someone they had no right to privacy. Nathaniel's face cooled. You will not search her like stolen property. Brooke's cheeks flushed, but she did not retreat. Then perhaps she should explain why she was standing so close to the royal table during the ceremony. Evelyn blinked. Because I was assigned there. By whom? Brooke asked. Mrs. Albright stepped forward before Evelyn could answer. The head housekeeper was small, gray-haired, and built from a lifetime of quiet endurance. Her hands were clasped tightly, but her voice did not shake. By me, Lady Hale. Miss Carter has served the West table at every formal event for 3 years. She is punctual, careful, and trusted. Brooke's eyes narrowed. Trusted by servants, perhaps. Evelyn saw Mrs. Albright flinch, and something inside her changed. It was small, no louder than a match striking, but it burned through the fear that had kept her silent. Please do not speak to her that way, Evelyn said. The words were soft, but the room heard them. Brooke turned slowly, almost delighted. Excuse me. Evelyn's hands trembled at her sides. She clasped them together so no one would see. Mrs. Albright has served this palace longer than I have been alive. She knows every room, every schedule, every person who keeps this place standing while the court sleeps. If trust means anything here, then hers should matter. The silence that followed was different from the others. Less hungry. More startled. Evelyn realized she had not defended herself. That had been too frightening. But defending Mrs. Albright had come as naturally as breathing. Nathaniel looked at her with an expression she could not read, though something in his gaze had softened at the edges. Alpha Hale, however, smiled faintly. A loyal speech. Very moving. Still, loyalty does not explain immunity. He turned toward the High Council seated beneath the moonlit arch. There is an old test, is there not? A harmless one. The Mirror of Vows. A murmur passed through the elders. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. That relic has not been used in years. Because no one has needed it, Hale replied smoothly. It reflects influence. If Miss Carter is protected by honest blood, the mirror will show it. If she is shielded by outside magic, it will show that as well. No harm will come to her. Evelyn heard the careful wording. No harm to her body, perhaps. But reputation could be shattered without leaving a mark. Nathaniel turned to her. You do not have to agree. That stunned her more than the accusation. In her life, choices usually arrived already made by someone else. What time to rise? Which hall to clean? When to speak? When to vanish? Yet here was a king in front of everyone giving her the right to refuse. She looked toward Mrs. Albright, whose eyes were bright with worry. She looked toward the kneeling women, still caught between fascination and confusion. She looked at Brooke, who expected fear to fold Evelyn back into place. And then Evelyn looked at Nathaniel. Not the crown. Not the black coat. Not the silver eyes that had broken the room. Just the man who had asked to be seen and was still afraid she would disappear. I will take the test, she said. Nathaniel's voice was low. Evelyn. Hearing her name from him again steadied her instead of shaking her. If I refuse, they will blame the servants. If I run, they will call me guilty. I have spent my whole life being careful, Your Majesty. I am tired of careful being mistaken for shame. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Nathaniel gave a single nod to the council. The oldest elder rose and lifted a silver key from around her neck. Behind the throne, 2 guards opened a narrow door Evelyn had never noticed, hidden within the carved wolves of the wall. From the darkness beyond, they carried out a tall mirror draped in white cloth. Even covered, it seemed to pull the warmth from the air. Evelyn felt every eye follow it as it was placed beneath the moonlit arch at the center of the hall. Brooke smiled as if the ending had already been written. Alpha Hale folded his hands behind his back. Mrs. Albright whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Nathaniel stepped close enough that only Evelyn could hear him. Whatever it shows, you will leave this hall under my protection. Evelyn wanted to believe him. But as the elder reached for the white cloth and the first silver glow spilled from beneath it, Evelyn understood that protection could not stop truth. And some truths, once awakened, did not return quietly to sleep. The white cloth fell away, and the Mirror of Vows awakened beneath the moonlit arch. It was taller than any person in the hall, framed in silver vines and old wolf symbols, its surface not glass but something deeper, darker, like still water under a midnight sky. Evelyn stood before it with her hands clasped tightly in front of her apron, trying not to show how cold the air had become. She expected to see herself as the court saw her. A pale Omega in a gray servant dress, tired around the eyes, too ordinary for the attention now fixed upon her. For a moment that was all the mirror showed. Then the silver surface rippled. Brooke gave a soft laugh. There. Nothing. But the elder beside the mirror lifted one hand. Wait. Evelyn's reflection began to change. Not into a queen. Not into some dazzling stranger with jewels in her hair. The mirror showed a little girl, maybe 12 years old, standing at the back gate of Blackwood Palace in a coat too thin for the winter wind. Her hair was darker then, loose around a frightened face, her hands red from the cold. Mrs. Albright, younger but already gray at the temples, opened the gate and wrapped a blanket around the girl's shoulders. Evelyn felt the memory land in her chest with a tenderness that almost hurt. She had forgotten how small she had been when the palace took her in. The mirror shifted again. It showed Evelyn carrying soup through the servants' hall at 2 in the morning, leaving it outside the room of an old guard who had been too proud to admit he was sick. It showed her mending the torn sleeve of a kitchen boy before the steward could scold him. It showed her placing fresh tea outside the king's private study on nights when the lamps burned long past midnight, never knocking, never asking for thanks. The hall grew quieter with each image. These were not grand deeds. No songs would be written about them. They were small acts, almost invisible, the kind the world stepped over without noticing. But the mirror noticed. Nathaniel noticed too. He watched the images with a stillness that made Evelyn's throat tighten, because some part of him was beginning to understand that she had been near his loneliness for years, not as a spy, not as a dreamer, but as someone quietly making the cold rooms gentler without ever expecting to be seen. Alpha Hale's smile thinned. Sentiment. The mirror is showing sentiment. The elder did not look at him. The mirror shows influence. Hers is not borrowed. Brooke stepped closer, frustration sharpening her voice. Then where is the proof of blood? Where is the protection? Kindness does not break royal magic. At that, the mirror darkened. Evelyn's reflection returned, but this time the neckline of her servant dress shimmered as if moonlight had touched skin beneath the cloth. Evelyn stiffened. She knew what the mirror had found before anyone else did. Slowly, reluctantly, the image showed a faint crescent mark just below her collarbone, pale silver against her white skin. A mark she had hidden since childhood because no one in the servant quarters knew what it meant and no one above stairs would have cared gently. The elder gasped. Mrs. Albright covered her mouth. Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Moonbound. The word moved through the court like wine through dry leaves. Evelyn looked from face to face, suddenly more afraid of wonder than she had been of scorn. Brooke shook her head. That is impossible. The moonbound lines disappeared generations ago. They disappeared from noble records, the elder said, eyes fixed on Evelyn with dawning reverence. Not necessarily from the world. Evelyn turned toward Nathaniel, confused and overwhelmed. What does it mean? His answer came slowly, as if he feared the words might frighten her away. It means my power cannot command your heart. No alpha magic can. No bond can force you. If you ever choose someone, it will be because you truly choose. The mirror pulsed once, and the candles throughout the hall flared silver. The kneeling women stirred as if waking from a dream. Some blinked in confusion. Some looked ashamed. One noble girl began to cry quietly, not from heartbreak, but from the relief of returning to herself. Evelyn saw it happen and understood the truth all at once. She had not resisted Nathaniel because she was empty. She had resisted because something in her soul had been born free. Brooke's face turned pale with anger. She is still a maid. Nathaniel finally turned to her fully. His voice was calm, and that calm was more powerful than any shout. Yes. And tonight, a maid has shown more honor than every title that tried to bury her. Evelyn's eyes stung. She wanted to tell him not to say such things, not here, not when every word raised her higher and made the fall more terrifying. But the mirror was still glowing, and the crescent mark in its reflection shone brighter with every breath she took. Alpha Hale bowed his head, but his eyes were cold. Then the matter is greater than we thought. If she is moonbound, she must be placed under council supervision until her loyalty is proven. Nathaniel's expression hardened. No, Your Majesty, for the security of the crown. She is not a threat to the crown. Nathaniel stepped beside Evelyn, not in front of her this time, but beside her, as if the space there had been waiting for him. She is the first person in this hall the crown could not bend. Evelyn felt the weight of the room shift again. For years she had carried trays, linens, secrets, and silence. Now the entire kingdom seemed to be placing a different weight in her hands, one she had never asked for. Nathaniel looked down at her, and his voice softened so only she could hear. You can still walk away. Evelyn stared at the mirror, at the frightened girl she had been, at the woman she had somehow become, and at the crescent of moonlight that proved her life had never been as small as they told her. Then she lifted her chin, even though her voice shook. Not while they are still blaming everyone below stairs for what they do not understand. The court did not know what to do with a servant who refused to disappear. Evelyn could feel it in the way the nobles shifted, in the way the council members exchanged careful looks, in the way Brooke Hale stood too still beside her father, as if stillness could hide the storm rising behind her eyes. The mirror of vows continued to glow beneath the moonlit arch, showing the crescent mark on Evelyn's reflection like a quiet answer the kingdom had spent generations forgetting. Nathaniel stood beside her, close enough that she could sense the warmth of him, but not so close that it felt like possession. That mattered. Every powerful person Evelyn had ever known took space without asking. Nathaniel, even now, seemed to be learning how not to. Alpha Hale broke the silence first. Your Majesty, no one wishes to harm Miss Carter or the household staff. But a moonbound appearing in your palace on the night of selection is not coincidence. Until we know who sent her, the responsible path is containment. Evelyn heard the word and felt the old fear return. Containment sounded cleaner than imprisonment, the way dismissal sounded cleaner than hunger, the way discipline sounded cleaner than humiliation. Nathaniel's voice lowered. Choose your next words carefully, Alpha Hale. Hale bowed again, perfect and empty. I serve the stability of the realm. Then serve it by telling the truth. The hall seemed to tighten around them. Hale's expression did not change, but Brooks did. It was brief, just a flicker, but Evelyn saw it. Servants noticed dropped keys, hidden stains, glances that lasted half a second too long. Nathaniel saw Evelyn see it. What truth? Hale asked. Nathaniel turned toward the elder by the mirror. The mirror of vows shows influence, does it not? Yes, Your Majesty. Then let it show who tried to influence the ceremony tonight. A murmur swept through the room. Brooke went pale. That is not necessary. Evelyn looked at her, and suddenly the pieces began to settle. Brooke had pushed for inspection. Brooke had pushed suspicion toward charms and hidden tricks. Brooke had wanted the mirror used, but only against Evelyn. Not against everyone. The elder placed both hands on the silver frame. The mirror will answer if the accused stands before it. Alpha Hale smiled faintly. Then have the girl remain where she is. No, Nathaniel said. Lady Brooke Hale will step forward. Brooke's lips parted. For the first time that night, her confidence cracked in a way everyone could see. I have done nothing. Evelyn almost believed her fear because fear had a way of making people look young. But then she remembered the wine, the laughter, the demand that she lower herself to the floor while the court watched. Nathaniel did not raise his voice. Then you have nothing to fear. The words echoed Brooke's own, and the hall understood. Slowly, under the weight of hundreds of eyes, Brooke walked to the mirror. Her white satin gown whispered across the marble. She stood before the silver surface with her chin high, but her hands trembled. At first, the mirror showed only her reflection. Beautiful, polished, beloved by a world that had always expected her to rise. Then the image rippled. It showed Brooke earlier that evening in a side corridor, speaking to a palace attendant from another household. A small vial changed hands. Not poison. Not anything violent. Only concentrated moonflower essence. A ceremonial enhancer meant to intensify alpha magic in a confined room. Gasps broke across the hall. The mirror shifted again, showing Brooke brushing the essence along the inside of the royal tablecloth, near where Nathaniel would stand, ensuring that every candidate would feel the pull of his curse more sharply than ever. Evelyn's stomach turned cold. The women had not simply fallen because of old magic. Their reactions had been worsened, sharpened, used. Brooke spun away from the mirror. I only wanted the ceremony to work. Everyone wanted it to work. One of the noble girls who had cried earlier stood unsteadily, her voice breaking. You made us feel things that were not ours. Brooke's face hardened. I gave you what you came for. The words were so bare, so careless, that even her father closed his eyes. Nathaniel stepped forward, and the room bowed under the quiet force of his disappointment. No. You used their hopes to secure your own. Brooke looked at him then, not as a woman in love, but as someone watching a crown move out of reach. And she did not? She pointed at Evelyn. She stands there pretending she wants nothing. That is the oldest trick of all. Evelyn felt the accusation land, but this time it did not bend her. I did want something, she said. Her voice trembled, but it carried. I wanted this night to end without anyone being shamed for someone else's ambition. The mirror pulsed softly, as if recognizing truth. Nathaniel turned to the guards. Lady Hale will be escorted to the East Wing until the council completes its review. Alpha Hale, you will remain in the palace as a witness, not an advisor. There was no violence in the command, but there was finality. Brooke stared as if the world had betrayed her by having consequences. As she was led away, Her eyes locked on Evelyn with the promise of future harm wrapped in silence. Evelyn should have felt victory. She did not. She felt the ache of a room waking from a dream and realizing how easily dreams could be handled by someone else. Nathaniel looked toward the kneeling and half-risen women. The ceremony is suspended. Any woman who wishes to leave may leave with full honor and royal protection. No family will be permitted to punish a daughter for walking away tonight. For the first time, the grand hall changed not because of magic but because of relief. One by one women stood. Some cried. Some held each other. Some looked at Nathaniel with clear eyes and saw, perhaps for the first time, not a prize, not a legend, but a man who had been trapped inside the same ceremony that trapped them. Evelyn watched it happen with her hands folded against her apron. Then Nathaniel turned back to her. "You defended them too," he said quietly. Evelyn looked down. "They were never my enemies." His gaze softened. "Most people would have thought they were. Most people are taught to fight over the place nearest the crown," she said. "No one teaches us to ask why the crown makes everyone kneel." Nathaniel was silent for a long moment. Then, before the court and beneath the fading glow of the mirror, he did something no one expected. He stepped back, giving Evelyn a clear path to the servants' corridor. Not dismissing her. Not claiming her. Letting her choose. "You may return below stairs if that is what you want," he said. "Or you may come to the library after the hall is cleared, and I will tell you everything I know about the Moonbound." Evelyn looked toward the corridor, toward the life she understood. Then she looked at the women leaving with their heads higher than before, at Mrs. Albright wiping tears with the edge of her sleeve, and at the king who had finally stopped asking destiny to choose for him. "I will come to the library," she said. Nathaniel nodded once, but the relief in his eyes was unmistakable. And as the silver bells began to ring again, not for a mating, but for the end of an old deception, Evelyn realized the most dangerous part of the night had not been standing when others knelt. It was choosing to stay standing after everyone finally noticed. The library waited behind a pair of dark oak doors carved with wolves beneath a crescent moon. Evelyn had passed those doors hundreds of times carrying towels, coal buckets, sealed letters, and silver trays, but she had never stepped through them. Servants did not enter royal rooms unless summoned, and even then they moved like shadows, leaving no sign they had ever breathed the same air as power. Tonight, when Nathaniel opened the doors for her himself, Evelyn hesitated on the threshold. The room beyond was warmer than she expected. Tall shelves climbed nearly 20 feet to a painted ceiling where constellations curled between clouds. A fire burned low in a stone hearth. Snow tapped softly against the windows, though it had not been snowing when the ceremony began. Blackwood Palace had always seemed to answer Nathaniel's moods, and tonight the weather looked as tired as he did. "You may sit anywhere," he said. Evelyn almost smiled at the impossibility of that. Anywhere was not a word servants trusted. She chose the chair farthest from the desk, close enough to listen, distant enough to remember herself. Nathaniel noticed but did not correct her. He crossed to a locked cabinet, removed a leather-bound book, and placed it on the table between them with the care of someone handling a fragile memory. "The Moonbound were not a noble house," he said. "Not in the way the court understands nobility. They were guardians of choice. In old times, when alpha power grew too strong, Moonbound women and men stood as witnesses to make certain no bond was forced, no oath was taken under influence, no heart was claimed without consent." Evelyn looked at the crescent mark hidden beneath her collar. It felt warmer now, as if it had heard its own name and awakened. Then why did they disappear? Nathaniel's hand rested on the book, but he did not open it yet. Because kings do not always like witnesses. The quiet truth of it settled heavily in the room. Evelyn thought of Brooke's moonflower essence, of noble families sending daughters into a ceremony clouded by ambition, of every woman who had mistaken pressure for destiny. "Were they harmed?" she asked. Nathaniel's eyes lifted to hers. Some were exiled. Some hid among ordinary packs. Some chose servant work because people in high places rarely look down long enough to recognize what stands beneath them. Evelyn let out a breath that almost became a laugh, but there was too much sadness in it. "So I may come from a line of powerful witnesses, and I have spent my life being ignored in the hallway. Perhaps that is why you survived." She wanted to resent the answer. Instead, it sounded painfully possible. Nathaniel opened the book to a page marked by a black ribbon. A painted symbol filled the parchment, a silver crescent above an open hand. Beneath it, words had been written in a careful, old-fashioned script. He turned the book so she could read. Evelyn traced the letters with her eyes slowly. The crown may command the body. Fear may command the voice. Hunger may command the knees. But only love freely given may command the soul. Her throat tightened. The sentence felt less like history and more like something she had been trying to believe her whole life without having words for it. Is that why your magic could not affect me? Yes, Nathaniel said. But there is more. He moved to the window, looking out at the snow gathering along the balcony rail. The curse on my bloodline was created when one of my ancestors tried to force a moonbound witness to approve a bond she knew was false. She refused. The court punished her by erasing her name from every record. Before she vanished, she swore that no Blackwood king would ever know true love until one of her blood stood before him freely and saw him without wanting the crown. Evelyn sat very still. The fire snapped softly. Somewhere far below, the palace bells faded into the night. That sounds like a story people tell to make suffering seem meaningful, she whispered. Nathaniel turned back to her, and there was no offense in his face. Only respect. It may be. I have learned not to trust legends simply because they are old. Then what do you trust? He looked at her for a long moment. What happened tonight? Evelyn looked away first, not because his gaze pulled her, but because it did not. That was somehow harder. With other nobles, she knew how to hide behind manners. With Nathaniel, silence felt honest, and honesty felt exposed. I do not know how to be what they will want me to be, she said. I do not know court dances. I do not know which fork is used for which course when there are 8 of them. I do not know how to speak so people hear grace instead of a servant forgetting her place. Nathaniel crossed the room slowly, stopping several feet away, giving her space even in reassurance. I am not asking you to become what they want. But they will. Yes, he said. They will. The honesty steadied her more than comfort would have. And what will you ask? Nathaniel's expression softened in the firelight. Only this. Do not let this palace teach you cruelty as the price of belonging. Evelyn felt the words strike something tender and hidden. All her life, power had seemed to require hardness. Brooke had it. Hale had it. Even the council wore it like formal clothing. But Nathaniel stood before her, cursed by power, exhausted by it, asking not to be obeyed but to be kept human. Before she could answer, a knock came at the library door. Mrs. Albright entered with a folded message in her hands and worry in her eyes. Forgive me, Your Majesty. Miss Carter. This was found pinned outside the servant's stair. Nathaniel took the note, opened it, and his face grew still. Evelyn rose. What is it? He handed it to her without hiding the truth. The message contained only one sentence, written in elegant black ink. A maid may stand for one night, but by dawn, every floor remembers where she belongs. The note made the library feel colder than the snow outside. Evelyn read the sentence twice, not because she did not understand it, but because some part of her had known it would come and still hoped the palace might surprise her with mercy. A maid may stand for one night, but by dawn, every floor remembers where she belongs. Mrs. Albright looked ashamed, as if the threat had been written by her own hand instead of left like a stain on the servant's stair. Nathaniel took the note back gently, his face calm in a way that did not hide anger so much as contain it. Who found this? He asked. Thomas from the West Corridor, Mrs. Albright said. He was bringing in extra firewood. He said no one was there when he arrived. Evelyn folded her arms around herself. The words on the page were not loud, not dramatic, not even specific. That was what made them familiar. People in power rarely needed to say exactly what they would do. They only had to remind you they could. It is Brooke, Mrs. Albright whispered. Or someone loyal to her. Perhaps, Nathaniel said. But Brooke is under watch in the East Wing. Alpha Hale still has friends in this palace, and some of them wear kinder faces than hers. Evelyn looked toward the door, imagining the lower halls where the kitchen girls would be scrubbing silver after midnight, where footmen would be stacking chairs, where everyone would already know that the king had looked at a maid and the nobles had not liked it. They will blame the staff again, she said. They will say someone helped me. They will search trunks, question the girls, cut wages, dismiss the ones without family. Nathaniel's gaze moved to her. You are thinking of them before yourself. They are easier to protect in my mind than I am. The confession slipped out before she could soften it. For a moment no one spoke. Then Nathaniel crossed to his desk, lifted a blank royal order from the drawer, and dipped a pen into black ink. Then we begin there. Evelyn watched as he wrote, each stroke deliberate. By royal command, no member of the Blackwood household staff is to be questioned, searched, punished, dismissed, or reassigned in connection with tonight's ceremony without direct approval from the Crown and the High Elder. Any noble found threatening palace servants will lose guest privileges immediately. Mrs. Albright inhaled sharply. Evelyn stared at the page, unable to breathe around the sudden ache in her chest. It was only paper. Ink on paper. Yet to people below stairs it was a roof in a storm. Nathaniel signed his name and pressed the Blackwood seal into warm silver wax. Have copies posted in every servant's corridor before dawn, he told Mrs. Albright. And wake the steward. I want every staff member paid an extra week for the disruption tonight. Mrs. Albright's eyes filled with tears. She curtsied so low her shoulders shook. Yes, Your Majesty. When she left, Evelyn remained standing, caught between gratitude and disbelief. You did not have to do that. Nathaniel looked down at the sealed order. That is what makes it worth doing. The answer was simple, and somehow that made it harder to bear. Evelyn turned toward the fire before he could see her expression clearly. She had imagined rescue in childish ways once, years ago. A lost family, a hidden inheritance, a door opening into a life where she never had to lower her eyes again. But this was different. This was not a hand pulling her out of her world. This was someone finally noticing that her world had people in it. A soft sound came from the old book still open on the table. The pages moved though no wind touched them. The crescent mark beneath Evelyn's collar warmed, and silver light spread across the parchment until new words appeared beneath the ancient vow. Nathaniel went still. Evelyn stepped closer, reading slowly as the letters formed. When the free heart stands beside the burdened crown, the false bond must be released beneath the full moon, before witnesses of every rank. She looked up. What does that mean? Nathaniel's face had gone pale. The curse can be broken tonight. How? The elder's voice answered from the doorway. Neither of them had heard her enter. She stood with her silver key against her chest, her expression grave but bright with wonder. Not through a mating claim. Not through a force bond. Through public release. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Explain. The elder stepped into the firelight. The king must stand before the court and surrender the power that makes others kneel. Miss Carter must stand beside him as witness, untouched by the spell, and speak freely whether she believes him worthy of release. Evelyn felt the room tilt. Me. A moonbound witness cannot be commanded. That is the point. The elder's voice softened. If you lie, the curse remains. If you speak truth, whatever that truth is, the old magic will hear it. Nathaniel looked at Evelyn, and for the first time since the hall, she saw fear openly cross his face. Not fear of the court. Not fear of losing power. Fear that the answer might be no. You should not be forced into this, he said. Evelyn almost laughed, but her eyes burned instead. That is the first thing anyone has said tonight that makes me think I might be the right person to ask. The elder bowed her head. Then we must return to the grand hall before moonset. The walk back felt longer than any mile Evelyn had ever crossed. Servants lined the lower corridor, whispering as royal guards posted Nathaniel's order on the walls. Some looked at Evelyn with awe, some with worry. Thomas, still holding a bundle of firewood, gave her a small nod that steadied her more than applause could have. When the grand doors opened again, the court had gathered in uneasy clusters beneath fading chandeliers. Brooke stood under supervision near the east arch, no longer triumphant. Alpha Hale watched with careful, cold attention. The women from the ceremony had returned too, not as candidates now, but as witnesses wrapped in shawls, their faces clear and solemn. Nathaniel walked to the center of the hall and removed the silver crown from his head. A sound moved through the room, soft and stunned. He placed it on the marble floor between himself and Evelyn. Tonight, he said, his voice carrying without force. "I asked the kingdom to witness not a claim but a release." Evelyn stood beside him in her gray servant dress, her hands shaking, her heart steady. The moonlight touched the crescent beneath her collar, and the entire hall waited for the maid to decide whether a king deserved to be free. For one long breath, Evelyn heard nothing but the faint crackle of candle flames and the soft rustle of frightened hope moving through the hall. The silver crown rested on the marble floor between her and Nathaniel, no longer above anyone's head, no longer flashing from a throne, only lying there like a question too heavy for gold to answer. Every face watched her now. Brooke with wounded pride. Alpha Hale with a coldness that could not hide his concern. The noble daughters with their shawls pulled tight, still recovering pieces of themselves. The servants gathered near the side doors, silent as shadows but standing straighter than Evelyn had ever seen them. Nathaniel did not speak. He did not guide her. He did not plead. That was what steadied her most. A man who could command a kingdom had chosen not to command her. Evelyn stepped closer to the crown, the crescent beneath her collar glowing through the gray fabric of her dress. "I was taught," she said, her voice small at first, then clearer, "that power meant being obeyed. I saw it in kitchens, in corridors, in rooms where people smiled while making others afraid. I thought the only way to survive near power was to become invisible." Her eyes moved to Nathaniel. "Then tonight, Your Majesty, you were the most powerful person in this room. And you used that power to give people a choice." The moonlight above them brightened. The old symbols carved into the floor began to shine, not with fire, but with a soft silver radiance that spread outward in quiet rings. Evelyn felt the pull of ancient magic listening, weighing not her rank, not her blood alone, but the truth inside her words. "I do not know if you deserve freedom because you are a king," she continued. "I do not think crowns deserve anything by themselves." A startled murmur passed through the court. Nathaniel's expression did not change, but something in his eyes warmed, as if her honesty was kinder to him than praise would have been. Evelyn drew a slow breath. "But I believe the man who set down his crown before asking to be released from it deserves the chance to become more than what was done to him." The hall went utterly still. Then the silver light rose. It climbed the marble columns, filled the chandeliers, and poured across the faces of every witness, noble and servant alike. Nathaniel's shoulders tensed as if an invisible weight had finally begun to lift. The air shivered once gently, like a held breath leaving the world. Around the hall, the women who had once fallen under the old pull stood fully upright. Some laughed softly through tears. Some held their hands to their hearts. No one knelt. No one was compelled. The curse did not break with thunder. It broke with silence, choice, and a maid's steady voice beneath the moon. Nathaniel closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his silver gaze was still powerful, still ancient, but no longer lonely in the same way. He looked at Evelyn not as an answer fate had delivered to him, but as a person who had stood beside him freely. The elder bowed her head. "The false bond is released." Brooke sank into a chair as if all her certainty had left her. Alpha Hale lowered his eyes, knowing the court had seen too much truth to be turned back by influence. Nathaniel picked up the crown, but he did not place it on his head. Instead, he held it at his side and turned to the gathered court. "By morning, Lady Brooke Hale will leave Blackwood Palace with honor enough to begin again, but without claim to this ceremony. Alpha Richard Hale will answer before the council for the use of moonflower essence, and for attempting to confine a free witness of the realm." His voice remained calm, fair, final. Then he looked toward the servants' doors. "And before sunrise, a new household decree will be written. No Omega, servant, ward, or orphan under this roof will be searched, dismissed, withheld wages, or punished by rank alone. Dignity is not a privilege granted by blood. It is the law of this house." Mrs. Albright covered her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. Thomas lowered the bundle of firewood he had forgotten he was holding. Along the side wall, kitchen girls and footmen stood in stunned silence, not because they had been enchanted, but because someone had finally spoken a protection they had never dared request. Evelyn felt her own tears come then, quiet and unashamed. Nathaniel turned back to her. "Evelyn Carter," he said, and her name no longer sounded borrowed from a world that did not want her. "I will not ask you for a bond tonight. You owe me nothing for telling the truth. that, more than any declaration, reached her. He was not claiming the woman who freed him as a reward. He was leaving the door open and his hands empty. Evelyn looked at the crown, then at the man beside it. "And if I choose to stay?" His breath caught just slightly. "Then you stay as my equal, not my servant." Months later, the story of that night would travel across the northern Pax, softened by distance, brightened by rumor. Some would say a hidden princess had been found. Others would say the moon itself had chosen a queen in gray. But those who had stood in the hall knew the truth was quieter and stronger. Evelyn did not become Luna because she fell under a spell. She became Luna because she did not. She learned the court slowly, with mistakes, with trembling hands, with misses. Albright correcting her place settings and Nathaniel walking beside her through every stair. Her first decree protected the staff. Her second opened witness hearings for forced bonds across the kingdom. Her third required every royal ceremony to include voices from every rank, not just those born near the throne. And on the night of her coronation, when the hall filled again with candlelight, Evelyn wore silver, but kept a small gray ribbon sewn inside her sleeve to remember the girl who had once carried trays through the shadows. Nathaniel stood beside her. No curse in his gaze, no crown between them. When the court bowed, Evelyn looked to the servants first. They were crying, smiling, standing proud at the edge of the hall. For the first time, she did not wish to disappear. She took Nathaniel's hand freely, and the moonlight over Blackwood Palace shone on a kingdom learning that true strength does not make the weak kneel. It helps them rise.